We've got some new reports to break down here on Giants Now. Jeremy Fowler of ESPN says that Brian Daboll is ready to fight for his job and has a plan to keep his job. And Albert Breer is reporting that John Mara is unsure if he will keep or fire Brian Daboll. We're going to break all that down around the corner, but first, make sure you are a part of the Noti Gang. Go down right now and turn your notifications on and set them to all, because Brian Daboll could be fired coming up on Black Monday. Have no idea when that is going to happen, and I don't want you to miss it. So go down right now, turn your notifications to all, and then go into your phone settings and allow YouTube to push you notifications, because there's about 4% of you that have not turned that on. You're watching Giants Now by Chat Sports. I am your host, Marshall Green. Appreciate everybody for stopping by. Crazy to think that Week 18 is just a couple days away, and we are only a couple days away from knowing if Brian Daboll will be the head coach of the New York Football Giants heading into the 2025 NFL offseason. I want to go to this quote from Jeremy Fowler first. We'll talk about Albert Breer's quote, and I'm going to go step by step on why and why not really trying to seesaw my decision on Brian Daboll, some pros and cons as well. But Fowler reporting this: somehow the Giants and Cowboys jobs seem more like wild cards than they did a few weeks ago. While Brian Daboll's 3-13 campaign in New York could prove a fireable offense, people there believe he's going to fight for his job on Monday or Tuesday of next week with a detailed plan, and owner John Mara really doesn't want to endure another regime change. And look, I love that Brian Daboll wants to continue to be the head coach of the New York Football Giants. It's one of the best jobs in all of professional sports when it comes to being a head coach. But he feels as if there is unfinished business. And I bet if you asked him man to man and said, do you think you got a fair shot? He would tell you no. And I think he thinks he could do a better job with a more equipped roster. I am curious, though, what the plan is that Brian Daboll is going to present to John Mara to try to sway him for Mara to believe that I, Brian Daboll, still deserve to be the head coach of the New York Football Giants. And on today's video, I'm going to try to decipher maybe what he's talking about and really just the overall pros and cons to Daboll. So let's start the evaluation here. Brian Daboll was brought here a major reason because of what he was able to do, not just with Josh Allen, but how he was able to transform that Buffalo Bills offense. He was brought to be the head coach of this football team to fix the offense. And the offense has not been fixed. I think you could argue that the offense is in a worse spot now than maybe it was when he took over, and it is definitely in a worse spot than it was when Brian Daboll was in his first year and he led the Giants to the playoffs. When you look at some statistics for the Giants offense under Brian Daboll, they are very pretty. And four that I like to look at when evaluating a play caller: how often do you score in the red zone? How good are you on third down? Can you draw up game-changing plays on fourth down? And how are you in two-point conversion opportunities? In 2022, the Giants offense was the best it had been under Daboll. They got to the playoffs, and he was solid in some stats. And a major reason the Giants got a lot of W's is because they were the fifth best red zone offense. They were all right, on third downs, middle of the pack on fourth downs, and middle of the pack on two-point conversion plays. Fast forward to 2023. They go from the fifth best red zone offense to the second worst in the National Football League. They were the third worst third down offense. They were a bottom 13 fourth down offense, and their two-point conversion offense was bottom 6. Then this year, the worst red zone offense, a bottom 6 third down offense. You were a bottom 12 fourth down offense, and you were about a bottom 10 two-point conversion offense. In fact, the only teams that were worse than you on two-point conversion plays were ones that either did not attempt a two-point conversion or did not make one this year. You only drew up a successful two-point conversion play 14% of the time this year. Look, Brian Daboll deserves a lot of credit for what the Giants were able to do in that 2022 season. He had a formula. He had a game plan to squeeze the most possible juice out of the Giants offense at that time. Remember, it wasn't a very skilled offense. Yes, you had Saquon Barkley, but your offensive line wasn't that good. Daniel Jones Daniel Jones, and your leading receiver by the end of the year was Richie James. And he found a way for them to not just get to the playoffs, win a football game. Brian Daboll deserves a lot of love for that. That's why he was the coach of the year. But he also deserves some blame for what the Giants have been and really what they have not been the last 2 years on offense. You have been boring. You have been non-explosive. You've been turnover happy. You've been bad on third down. You've been bad on fourth down. You've been bad in the red zone. And you've been horrible on 2-point plays. Those are all things great offenses are good at. And the Giants' offense the last 2 years has been the furthest thing in the world from a great offense. I will say this, though. I do think Brian Daboll has been held back by his personnel. I do think he is more specifically, though, the quarterback play. This isn't a part of this show where I'm just going to shit on Daniel Jones. We know what he is. We know what he is not. And I think even his biggest fans will understand and agree that he wasn't good enough to really elevate this entire offense by himself. And that's really what you need in this league at the quarterback position. Overall, I ask myself, with the QBs that he was handed, has Brian Daboll gotten a fair shot? I really don't think so. Because he was brought here for what? Remember, timelines are important. Why was Brian Daboll brought here? To identify and develop the next quarterback. There was never a next quarterback. It was just Daniel Jones. We saw last week, though, Brian Daboll with Drew Lock was able to put together a stat line that featured over 73% completion rate, 309 passing yards, 4 touchdowns through the air, 1 on the ground, 5 total touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. He had one of the best games in NFL history. Not Giants history, not Drew Lock career, one of the best games in NFL history. And I think Brian Daboll deserves a lot of credit for that, as well as the Indianapolis Colts defense being the worst tackling defense in the NFL. He also somehow won 3 games with Tommy DeVito. However you want to chalk those up, how he got it done, he did get it done. He got the locker room to believe. He put the people in position in the locker room that helped other people believe. But man, it just hasn't been really good outside of those moments. And for the crowd that says, let him get his own chance with his own QB, I somewhat side with that crowd. Because I do still believe that drafting a rookie quarterback and having Brian Daboll as their head coach is a successful path to travel down. I do think that Brian Daboll can get more than expected out of a quarterback. And I think he has an eye for quarterback talent. You go back to Hard Knocks this past spring, and Joe Schoen asked Brian Daboll, have you seen enough to trade up and select Jaden Daniels? Have you seen enough? And Brian Daboll says, yeah, I would. And what do you know? Jaden Daniels potentially looks like an MVP candidate in his near future. You could argue that Jaden Daniels right now is the best quarterback in the NFC. He's a damn good player. And if Brian Daboll can get us our next Jaden Daniels, that'd be awesome. I think he has an eye for QB talent. There's also some other major red flags on his resume that we got to discuss. That's around the corner. First, though, I got to give a huge shout out to our proud sponsor, Game Time. If you want to go to the Week 18 Giants game, or you want to go to a Knicks game coming up, or a concert, or a comedy show, get your tickets at Game Time. So download the app, and if you use our code ChatSports after you create an account, you're going to get $20 off your first purchase, where terms do apply. Game Time is the best app there is. They get you the best seats for the lowest price guarantee. The app is awesome. Prices of the events drop as the events get closer. You get views from your seat inside the app. It's super easy to get in the stadium because you get to access your tickets on your phone. And if you don't want to go to the game or the concert anymore, you could sell your tickets very easily last minute. I also love the features they offer that help you get that best price, like the all-in pricing feature and that Game Time Picks feature. Use those 2 features, turn them on, make sure they look white just like the all-in pricing. That's how you know it's on, and you're going to get the best deal there is. So download the app, create an account, and use the promo code ChatSports, CHATSPORTS, for $20 off your first purchase, where terms do apply. All that information is clickable down in the comments and description of today's show. What time is it? It's Game Time. Be a real one. Use Game Time. It's the only app I use because I get the best deal every time. I also think a major part of evaluating a head coach is, how do they build a staff? How do they go about putting talented coaches around them? Because I've heard it and I believe it. A coach is only as good as his assistants. And there's no real, I would say, it's not a how do I want to say this? It's not a coincidence that the Giants' best season under Brian Daboll was when they had a strong defensive coordinator in Wink Martindale, and Mike Kafka as an offensive coordinator had a great season. But since then, it hasn't been good. Under Brian Daboll, you've already gone through two defensive coordinators. You've already gone through two offensive line coaches. You've already gone through two special teams coordinators. Like, it's one thing to not be able to identify talent. There's also another thing about not being able to build and establish and have relationships with these other coaches. You weren't able to get it done with Wink Martindale for whatever reason that is. Bobby Johnson was horrible here. He looks great in Washington. I mean, are we going to let him have three defensive coordinators in 4 years as a head coach? I worry about his ability to have relationships and identify good coaches and keep good coaches. That's a major red flag for me. I do like the fact, though, that players have not quit on him. And I know players have not quit on Brian Daboll. I know personally that players like playing for Brian Daboll. There are players that were on the Giants the last 2 years that are no longer on the Giants, and they have told me that they liked playing for Brian Daboll. And you can tell that that team versus the Indianapolis Colts played for Brian Daboll in Week 17. Yes, they played for themselves. Players don't tank, but you saw a little bit more fight, and you saw a little bit more grit, and you saw that they played for their head coach. I go back and look at two of the wins, of the 3 wins for the Giants this year, versus the Browns and versus the Seahawks. Giants won those games, but remember how they won those games. Early turnovers happened in both of those games. The Giants saw themselves in early holes in both of those games. The Giants could have easily quit in both those games, but they did not. They fought through adversity. They overcame the challenges of the early struggles early on in those games, and they went on to win those games. And I think that speaks volumes about you as players and how you think about your head coach when you don't quit and you fight through adversity. And remember, how awesome was Brian Daboll in that 2022 season? I thought this quote from Kayvon Thibodeau just a couple days ago about Brian Daboll said a lot about him. Quote, he's a great coach. It's sports, man. It's something that you can't control. I love him. I think he's a great coach. I think he's a player's coach. I think he has great philosophies. Sometimes things don't shake out. I got total confidence in the organization and total confidence in the coaching. I don't know how it'll shake out, but things will happen how they're supposed to happen. And I expect the Giants, the football, the New York Football Giants, the roster, the players to go out and compete versus Philly, to go out and play with their hearts on their sleeve and give it all they got for themselves, for their teammates, but also for their head coach, Brian Daboll. But overall, like, that sounds good. It sounds sweet when I'm saying it. It's all cute, and we understand, Daniel Jones was the quarterback that Brian Daboll had to play with. But at the end of the day, it's the National Football League. It's a results-driven business. And 18-31-1 in 3 seasons is simply just not good enough. And even if you go back to the 2022 season where the Giants started 6-1, from the time they started 6-1 after that, they're 12-30-1 in regular season football games. 12-30-1 in the last 43 games as the New York Giants head coach. That's a fireable offense, especially when you consider how it happened. You go from a playoff team, a playoff winning team, to picking 6th in the draft, then to potentially picking number 4, number 3, number 2, the worst record in the NFL. It's supposed to be progress like this. You're never supposed to see where results get worse and worse as a head coach's tenure goes on. I want to ask you, should the Giants fire Brian Daboll? It's Friday when we're recording this. A decision is probably going to be made on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. F for fire, K for keep. I really do lean fire. I do. But for who is the question? Who are you going to fire Brian Daboll for? Because I don't think it's the greatest head coaching cycle. I don't think it's the greatest crop of candidates at that head coach position. And I do think Brian Daboll is better than some of the candidates. And if you can get a guy like Mike Vrabel, yeah, do it. Like, if you know that you can hire Mike Vrabel as your next head coach, as the leader of your organization, as the driving force of culture for your football team, you do it. But, like, is Is other coaches better than Brian Daboll out there? I don't know. I keep going back to the fact that I would love that Brian Daboll gets to work with a young QB. But there's other coaches I'd also like to work with a young QB. The only reason you're keeping Daboll is because he's a QB guy. You can find someone else that's a QB guy and more to offer. At the end of the day, I lean fire. But I don't think it's the end of the world if you do keep him. That's kind of what I come to. And there's not many guys I would fire him for, and that there's not a lot of coaches I would fire him for to go and get. I don't know. It's a sticky situation. If you're going to fire Brian Daboll, though, I'll end with this. If you're going to fire Brian Daboll, you better fire Joe Schoen, because I think they're a package deal. That's about where I end on that. Make sure you are following me on social media. I'm on Twitter. I'm on IG at @MarshallGreen_. Hit me up. Let's go Big Blue.